I'd like to welcome everybody to Global Accessibility Awareness Day. And there are multiple events going on across the globe to just celebrate the fact that I think it's a celebration of the fact that more people are aware than ever before that accessibility is important on so many different levels. And our company, Digital Accessibility by WeCo, we're celebrating digital inclusion today with a special event called AI Accessibility and Users with Disabilities. We've got a big panel and an experienced panel for you to listen to today and to ask questions of. So thank you so much for joining us. A little bit about our company, Digital Accessibility by WeCo. We are a group of digital accessibility professionals with a mission to put subject matter experts who live with disabilities at your disposal. We are a group of digital accessibility specialists and UX testers, all of whom have the title of living with a disability as part of our job requirement. So this slide shows one of our accessibility specialists who's on the call today, Dane Dunham, doing a manual accessibility audit. And I am going to just stop share because I think that these slides are on automatic timing, but I'll keep talking. And we are a group of digital accessibility professionals who live with disabilities, and we are a mission-based company. So bear with me just a second, and I'm going to fix my slide deck. Absolutely. We were on automatic with that. And I'm going to reshare. Thank you for bearing with me. I don't know if anybody else experiences that, but if you practice timing with PowerPoint and forget to turn it off, you'll be in the middle of a presentation and it will automatically advance your slides for you. So the work that we do here at WeCo is we are specialists in manual accessibility audits, but we're also specialists in disability-focused UX training. So everyone that you work with at WeCo is also an expert at living with a disability in everyday life. So we have our own training and testing and consulting services also. A little housekeeping before you begin. Please remember to mute yourself. It is really easy to forget that, so check periodically and make sure that your microphone is off. There is a chat box available. If you want to ask questions or make comments, please select everyone. If you have a specific question that you'd like to ask our moderator, Ellen, you can select Ellen, moderator. And just a reminder that we do have accessibility accommodations that are part of this presentation. We have ASL interpretation and we have captioning that is part of Zoom available to you. So I would like to now introduce our moderator. Paul Day is a lead accessibility analyst at Visa, and he is also a WeCo accessibility consultant. And he has been with us off and on for many years and has a wonderful career background in digital accessibility, a lot of experience on different types of accessibility, including assistive device education. So he brings a wonderful wealth of experience to moderate our panel yet again this year. So Paul, will you take it away?
Yes, I will. Thank you, Lynn, for that introduction. I want to welcome everybody here going on this very explosive or popular topic at this day and time, AI and accessibility. So just a quick note, as Lynn mentioned, my current role is at Fortune 500 company, but anything that I say or my opinions here today are not that of Visa or reflective of Visa's culture or view within the marketplace, and are solely my own opinions and views. And I'm representing WeCo here today. So that being said, I want to sort of introduce our esteemed panelists that I am going to have the pleasure of moderating today. Today we have Grant Leard Jr., and he is the owner of the, let's see, Lynn, do you have Grant's information there for me? I don't seem to have that on me here. But just a quick heads up for
This is
everyone else.
Grant. Yeah, I'm the owner. This is Grant. I'm the owner of Dep Network. And I run this, and I've been running this for over 25 years. Most of the time we are focused in the area of Texas. So that is where I live, in Dallas. And in addition, I also work full-time for as a production specialist for
Texas Instruments.
Texas Instruments.
Thank you, Grant.
So I also have speech support here through interpreting as well as captioning, and I've been using that for many years.
Thank you, Grant. And just as a note, as Grant stated, he will be speaking through an interpreter, two interpreters, Janet and Rivka. So the voices that you're going to hear translating Grant's language will be the voices of Janet and the voices of Rivka. So thank you very much, Grant, and thank you, Janet and Rivka, for joining us today. Next panelist that I want to bring attention to is Taylor Rand. Taylor, you mind introducing yourself to the audience?
Yeah, real quick, Paul. My last name is ARNDT. It's Arndt. So I just want to make sure that that was for the on the record, so that way there wouldn't be any confusion.
Thank you very much.
No problem. So I am one of the manual accessibility auditors here at WeCo, and I have been blind since birth, and I've been doing digital accessibility related tasks for over 6 years.
Awesome. I'm gonna have a great time getting to sort of pull on your knowledge throughout this panel. All right. Our next panelist, Maureen. Sorry, I've been working with you for a while now. I should know how to say your name. Maureen Pringhofer. Would you mind telling us a little bit about yourself?
Yep, no problem. So this is Maureen Pringhofer. I have been with WeCo almost since it started, since 2012. I've been a UX tester since that time and been also involved with sales since 2016. I am totally blind and also use a wheelchair because of a spinal cord injury, which does affect my keyboard use a little bit. I have a bit of a modified keyboard, and I am an avid Braille person using a Braille display.
Awesome. Thank you. All right, next up, Chad Koch. You want to introduce yourself to the audience?
Sure. Yeah. Hi. My last name is Cook. Okay. But yeah, I'm Chad Cook. I've been with WeCo pretty much with this since it started 12 years ago. I started as a tester. Now I just kind of moved to a subject matter expert. I have a motor-related disability. I have a wheelchair. I have no use of my fingers or my hands. I can use my arms, so I rely on speech recognition and keyboard navigation.
Awesome. And I greatly appreciate you correcting me on your last name. I'm going to blame that one on Jaws. All these years, man, Jaws has been saying your name as Koch. So thanks
That's
for
right.
that. Just like it says GAAD is God. I was like, I think that's a better name for it, quite honestly. All right. Next up, and I won't get your name wrong, Tyler Malone. You want to give us a little introduction?
Wow, round of applause for Paul. That was great. Perfect pronunciation. I'm impressed. Yeah, my name is Tyler Malone. I am a lead accessibility specialist here at WeCo. That's it. That's all I do.
All right. I'll pull more out of you during the panel. He's a little bit more than
Bring it.
that. Tyler's a good guy. All right. Last but not least, and first, you've already been introduced to her, but I want her to sort of step up again and sort of give you her background and depth of knowledge here. So, Lynn, could you please introduce yourself to the audience?
I might make you say my last name just
Wehrman. There we go. Or as Jaws says, Veerman. So
yeah, it's actually my last name is kind of interesting. When I and our advisory board decided to form this company, I didn't know what to name the company, and my last name is Wehrman, which in German means soldier or protector. And my advisory board really liked that. And so they named the company the Wehrman Collaborative, which one of the board members said, oh, we can shorten that to WeCo. And so we've always liked to consider WeCo also means our company, that it wasn't just my company, but everyone that's been a part of building it. So just a little story about where we came from. I'm Lynn Wehrman. I identify as a professional living with a disability. I was born with 2 cognitive disabilities in a family that epilepsy was so prevalent that we were actually studied by Columbia University. Epilepsy runs through generations and generations of my family. I also live with a major mental illness. I was diagnosed in my 30s with borderline personality disorder traits and really struggled through a lot of different misdiagnoses, long hospitalizations, and finally found my feet with dialectical behavioral therapy in my late 30s. So my life really began in my late 30s. And through a job that I had with the state of Minnesota Department of Transportation, found out I was good at building websites, found out that the agency needed special websites that were built for our Americans with Disabilities Act transition plan. And that was back in 2008 when people didn't really know what an accessible website was, and they asked me to figure it out. And the people that were part of our stakeholder group at MnDOT became my friends. I went into their homes. They showed me how screen readers, screen magnification, modified mouses, Zoom worked. Back then, Zoom was not, it was a visual for making letters bigger on a screen. But we became friends and realized that what we were doing and making an accessible website for the agency could be a job and should be a job. And so in an industry that is dominated by people who do not live with disabilities, we really stand out because it is a requirement of the job at WeCo that you must live with a disability to do this work. So thanks, Paul.
Awesome. All right, let's get started. So I'm going to sort of lay out sort of what we're going to cover today. All right, we're going to cover 3 key areas, and we're going to augment those 3 key areas with some quotes from the industry, right? Various places within the industry. And we're also going to show you some innovations that are out there from a car company. And then we're going to show you a demo of another sort of company that's working for people with disabilities and using AI to sort of enhance a tool that has already been out there on the market. So some of the key topics that we're going to start out with is, does AI make life easier, right? That's one of the questions out there. Does it make it easier? Then we're going to touch AI bias and misrepresentation, right? And that's in the guise of for people with disabilities, right? does it cause bias and misrepresentation? And then we're going to end with, where will AI lead digital accessibility? Right? That's another big question. Where is it going to lead us in the world of testing, development, right? So before we get started with our first topic, where does AI make your life easier? I'm going to share that video with you. And this is from Honda. And this is an accessible AI feature that Honda has. And that's going to set the tone really for this first section of our topic. So if we could show that video, please.
Absolutely. I will go ahead and share my screen, and if there's any audio issues, feel free to let me know and I'll restart that.
Just a little more frame of reference. This video that we're showing is a really interesting representation of how AI can make things more accessible for some of us who live with disabilities.
All right, here's the video.
Vehicles use sensing technology on the road.
Cars these days see all around them. Other cars, the edge of the road, traffic signs, even the chance of collision before it happens. But somehow, amidst all this technology, we haven't figured out how to help every human in that same car see what's out there too.
Visually impaired people share their experiences.
People that are sighted have constant input. Like, I don't know what I'm missing until I know what I'm missing. I don't ask, I knew I was missing out, but I didn't want to inconvenience other people.
I feel the movement of the car, but I certainly don't get much about what's outside the car. So I'm sort of a captive there.
Sometimes when I'm in the car with friends, I do feel lonely. It's a very isolating experience.
Sandy Lacey, Howe Innovation Center.
People with disabilities are the world's largest minority, the only minority group anybody can join at any moment in their lives. And the reality is, if we're all lucky enough to grow into old age, we're all going to join the community at some point.
Honda introduces Scenic Audio with Perkins School for the Blind and the Howe Innovation Center.
The app is really a combination of a number of different artificial intelligences working together and then a number of different data sets working together.
Jason Carmel, creative technologist.
We use things like computer vision to actually see what's out there, and then generative AI to then describe it in a way that's kind of meaningful.
A list of data sets appears.
Added to that are all of these data sets that provide much more context. So things like the weather that's outside, the traffic, what direction that you're going, and then points of interest along the way that might help us describe things in a much more interesting way.
When I first heard about it, I was like, okay, well, that's a cool story, bro, but why? And then the more I thought about it, I'm like, wait, I can get in a car and get the same information as a sighted person. That's a really cool idea.
The app interprets the world outside for visually impaired passengers.
As we cruise down Pine Street, our gaze falls upon a sandy shore. Peaceful waves ripple gently, and distant figures stroll along the water's edge, enjoying the serene maritime vibe of Vineyard Haven. While ahead of us, the partly cloudy sky melts with the ocean's edge, leaving us eager for the views that await. Struck by the iconic green and white facade, the towering red brick walls adorned with banners of legendary ball players. It's an overcast day, and the rain adds a slick sheen to the brick sidewalk. A rainbow arches faintly, giving a splash of magic to this quaint town tableau.
Ooh. Love rainbows.
It's not about wayfinding. It's not about telling somebody when the next exit is on the road. It's about sharing the experience of being on the road.
Natalie Anderson, Perkins School for the Blind.
Anytime we can create an equitable experience and foster independence, it's a good day here at Perkins.
Phil Hareska, Honda.
This app really is more about storytelling and about this narrative versus just making it about functional. And that's really the inspiration of the Power of Dreams.
The idea of being able to sit in a car and enjoy the scenery around me is novel.
Cassandra arrives at the lighthouse.
Weathered shingles tell tales of salty air and sea sprays, their presence and homage to New England charm. As we approach the ferry at Woods Hole, Its white lighthouse stands sentinel against the gray sky.
It's a lot to pull together, but when it's all together, it's like, holy crap.
The impression of a space in transition, waiting for its next purpose.
That's cool.
We catch glimpses of greenery, spirit.
Honda, the power of dreams.
All right. Awesome, right, guys? That's some that's some awesome technology there. All right, before I open it up to the panel, I also want to give them some food for thought before we dig deeper into the world of, does AI make your life easier? And I'm going to start this with a quote by, I said I wouldn't butcher her name, Yona Welker from the World Economic Forum. Okay. And she is quoted by saying, AI algorithms and systems play a significant role in supporting and accommodating disabilities, from augmenting assistive technologies and robotics to creating personalized learning and healthcare solutions. In particular, such systems may fuel existing assistive ecosystems, health, work, learning, and accommodation solutions. So, with that opinion and the video that we just saw, I want to open the floor with Taylor. How do you use AI in your everyday life?
I use AI for practically anything that I can use AI for, and I'm pretty innovative with it. So a couple examples may include having it read what's around me, like if I'm trying to find a sign, or if my Uber driver drops me off at the wrong place and gets me in the middle of the street. True story, that's happened last week. I also use AI to help me write emails, help me to write just about anything, because writing is hard. So those are the basic things I use it for, but I am an AI enthusiast, so anything and everything, I've probably tried it.
Awesome. Maureen, what about you? How do you use it in your everyday life?
Well, I use AI for basically getting information. I'm a diabetic, and one of the big things that I use AI for is just asking my Alexa what the carbs are in various foods, even down to, a particular brand of food. So I know how much insulin to give myself. And that is one of the very practical things that I do with AI. And I use it to find out about information around me. In fact, right before I signed into this Zoom room, I use an app that we're going to talk about later on the phone called Be My Eyes, just to find out from a volunteer if my office light was turned on or not. So mainly I use AI for getting information.
That's awesome. And I think it's something that I think the disability community has known for a while, that AI has been here, for a while now. And I think it's just coming to like sort of popularity with everyone else, with Chat GPT and things like that. But we've been using it in one way or the other to sort of help us in our daily lives. That being said, Grant, do you use any assistive technology? Not technology. Do you use any AI in your everyday life?
I do. I mean, not specifically daily, but I do use AI as much as I can. For example, for Google, the live transcription that happens, I do use that feature quite often, especially if I'm chatting with a coworker at the last minute and there's not an available interpreter for whatever reason. And so I will jump on and use that as my mode of communication. And another AI feature that I use is an app called live captioning. And I've been using that to watch my whatnot.
Perfect.
For whatnot, yep. So
So
It's
I'm
an
able
action thing I
to
like to watch.
engage. Yeah, it's an action show. I like to watch it, and it automates that captioning for me so I can be involved and be a part of that dialogue in that community. And I do know that the products for AI are just on the rise. So we're going to see a lot of improvement in that arena.
Awesome. Thank you for also shedding like highlight on your use of it during work, as well as I know many companies are now embracing the use of AI to enhance creativity and ease of work. So thank you for that. Tyler, do you use any AI to make your life easier?
I don't know if it makes my life easier, but I certainly use AI sometimes.
Awesome.
Sorry, I have a very old man yells at clouds view of AI overall. I was an enthusiastic early adopter of ChatGPT as an experimental toy to see what it would be able to do in the future. And so I came into AI thinking this will be really cool in 10 years. I'm really excited, but I don't see where it fits for me yet because there was a lot of wrestling with prompts, and that's kind of been my experience consistently. I used it at work, sometimes for development work, sometimes I'm just trying to use the support features, and I get put to a chatbot instead of a person. I have to ask it questions. So I've kind of learned how to be kind of a prompt engineer and probe it for what I need. As far as assistive technology in daily life, I do use Microsoft Seeing AI. I find that is an increasingly good implementation. It has a lot of different features for low vision people. It'll describe pictures with a lot of accuracy. They just added a feature where you can ask clarifying questions. So it'll describe a picture and then you can say, what about this? And it'll go find that and describe if that's in the picture. It can also recognize people, tell you about your surroundings, tell you if the lights are on and off, what color something is. So that's probably the way I use it the most, outside of getting, little scrap together skeleton scripts for code stuff.
Cool. Chad, do you use AI in your everyday life?
Yeah, almost every day. On my phone, using it like I say, I use speaker recognition quite a bit. So, replying to text and emails, navigating websites, just kind of saying where I want to go, what I want typed in, forms and fields, and along with my Google Home, turning on my lamps and so forth. I'm very fortunate I was able to get a new van a couple years ago, and that has peak recognition in it, so I can change my climate conditions in the vehicle because I have to use both my hands to drive, obviously. So I think that's where cars are getting close to driving themselves, and just by talking to them. So I think that is really been very helpful for me.
Awesome. Yeah, that's cars is like you said, is another place where innovation around AI is come to the forefront. It's witnessed in that video that we started out with. Lynn, as a president of a company and as a person with a disability, how do you use AI in your everyday life?
Well, not that much different than everyone else, but I think that there's some notable assistance available for those of us who live with cognitive disabilities. My disability can be more active at some time than others, and for me, that often comes in the form of depression. And depression can really impair my cognitive process. It can make it difficult for me to gather my thoughts to read. It can make it difficult and as someone who does a great deal of writing as part of my job, that can be a real problem. So, the generative AI solutions that will craft things for me, and, really delightful to be able to pick what type of voice to have things written in. If I want something written more professionally or more casual, that's been a lifesaver. Most recently, I've had the experience, my husband and I own a Tesla. And so you either love me or hate me because I have a Tesla, but we bought that as our single family car. And while we don't have the automatic driving feature, the self-driving feature, We did get to try it last month for a month. They just kind of sent it out to everyone, and I had never experienced that before. And I have a daughter, a stepdaughter who lives with cerebral palsy. And as that car was driving us places, we actually took a road trip to Kansas last month, and it largely drove us to Kansas. All I could think about was my stepdaughter Amy, who isn't able to drive herself, that someday she's going to be able to own a car and just get in and tell it where to go. And that kind of independence really excites me. So
I can tell you that definitely excites me as well, as a person that is totally blind myself and having to rely on Uber and experience things like Taylor experienced, being dropped off at the wrong location or across a busy street from your location. Being able to get myself there on my own is something that I'm looking forward to. So I'm just hoping that they hurry up with it before I get much older and I can't, I won't want to go anywhere because I won't want to leave my house because I'll have everything I need because of AI. I'll have virtual reality. I will sit on my couch and go where I want to. So yeah, that is awesome. All right. So we sort of covered my second follow-up question to everyone is in what ways has it made your life easier, with some of the questions that you guys have provided already. But I'll open it up to the panel, and anyone can answer if you feel that there's another way that it has made your life easier that you haven't yet covered. Before we move on to the next topic, I'll give you guys that opportunity to do that right now. Does anybody want to elaborate on exactly how it makes it easier for you, or do you guys feel that you've covered that? All right. Awesome.
Well, I know Maureen Pranghofer cooks, and I know that she gets her recipes off of Alexa, right, Maureen?
Sorry, I actually usually don't, because I like to have them in Braille, so I usually get them off of the internet and then Braille them with my software, because it's easier for me to have the recipe sitting on the counter and I can just read it and add ingredients as I go. But I thought of something when you were talking about the self-driving cars, which I am really looking forward to when I'm in a power wheelchair, and it's very cumbersome for me to get around because I drive with my right hand and I use my right cane because I'm totally blind with the other hand, and I never go straight because without your feet on the ground, you don't know where there's any landmarks or anything. And so I mostly really rely on sighted assistants to tell me constantly which way to go, or to have someone walking behind me that knows how to drive my chair. And there is an AI thing now called the Lucy, which I had the chance to test. And you can, as you're going along, I could, in theory, not have to cane, and it would tell me when there's something there in front of me and which way to go to get around it. But as we found, it's not it needs a little work yet, but I'm looking forward to someday when I can just get in my chair and go without having a sighted assistance. The problem we had with it was when my service dog would wag its tail, it thought that was an object and it kept stopping.
Yeah.
Yeah, is there any kind of hitches that people have with the AI you use in everyday life, and what way is it not quite perfect?
Good question. I think we've all experienced something like that, right?
Oh yeah.
Oh my gosh, who hasn't?
All right, Taylor, if you want to elaborate, then Chad, you can fill in.
Yeah, I'll go. So about the self-driving cars, I'll address that first. I'm very happy to be fortunate to be living in a AI test ground city, as I call it, where basically everybody is testing AI. I mean, it's kind of crazy because Austin is Tesla's here and everybody's here. So I am fortunate that hopefully Waymo will be here at the end of the year. That's what they say, and I'm on the waiting list to test it. Other than that, when it's inaccurate, I think sometimes if I'm writing an email, it's like, I can't get the right tone, but especially if I'm trying to write some code for a WordPress plugin that I really don't know all the, code for, and then it writes incorrect PHP and gives me a fatal error, that really makes me upset because I'm like, oh my God, I just need to get this plugin done, and you're going to write incorrect code, and it's really annoying. So that's the worst part about AI is when it writes incorrect code that you really need to get done.
Chad, you wanted to chime in on this as well?
Yeah, I think, using speech recognition, the biggest thing is when I pronounce something and it misunderstands me at what it wants to type in there, or puts a different something else, or tries and corrects me at times. So I have to go back and say, no, I wanted this in there instead. But I think that's one of the biggest things. But the more you use it, the better it obviously gets. Like most people probably know. And it really helps. Like I noticed yesterday evening, I was texting somebody, and it provided me suggestions on how my sentence should be phrased because my grammar is very bad. So I really do like that part, in texting and emails. It makes that much easier, friendlier to use. So yeah, other than that, I can't think of too much else.
Awesome. I thought the text dictation thing was just me. I love when it tries to correct me and makes it 10 times worse. I always have to like double check my text before I send it out, especially like to my boss. I'm like, nope, that's not what I wanted to say. That's
right.
Don't send that. So, yeah.
I actually have a question for Grant. I have a good friend who is an ASL interpreter. And a few years ago, we noticed that there were avatars that were doing translation of ASL into speech and back and forth. And I'm wondering, how good is that technology? Does that work?
Well, that's an interesting topic. Because, well, first of all, everything really depends on sound when you talk, because spoken language is sound-based. And everything in technology too, especially, Alexa is sound-based, you talk to her. And so a deaf person is not going to benefit from something that's sound-based. So I'm still at this point waiting for AI to develop something that can read people's sign language. And that is probably one of the biggest challenges facing AI right now, just to see they've started kind of experimenting with developing that type of methodology. But we do need something that can communicate both ways, not just the one way. So if it's reading language, then that's fine. I can read the language, but then how do I talk back? It's going to have to be able to translate my sign back into a spoken language, and most people don't sign. So there's a lot more challenge in that area that AI needs to develop more. I don't think AI is there yet with that. Translation is going to happen, but not right now, not yet, hopefully soon, but not yet.
So, Grant, how do you communicate with friends who don't understand sign language?
Well, some people will learn the language. They'll learn sign language in order to communicate. Some people will just communicate with me through email and a messenger, or texting, any of those electronic ways, different ways to communicate that way. So for example, if we're like walking in the hallway or something like that, if we're walking along, if you bump into somebody in the hall and you want to just have a quick chat, like, hey, what's up? How you doing? Texting takes up a lot of time. So most of the time we're not really communicating during breaks or something. I mean, we can communicate at work because we're sitting right next to each other, and it's easy to just email back and forth. So for that, it works. So it's not a perfect way to communicate, but hopefully things will improve and get better soon.
Sorry, Paul. Thanks for letting me ask those questions.
No, it's an interactive panel,
That's no problem.
and they're awesome questions. So thanks for sharing that, Grant. I greatly appreciate that, and you know it educates sure of people everywhere. That you think about AI and how it affects all different types of disabilities and not just, let's say, like the visually impaired or physical and motor disability. So thanks for that. All right.
Sure.
So
yeah, and also just to add, for example, like in the theaters, if you go to a movie theater and you can watch a movie anytime, but I can't, I would have to check ahead of time to see if it's captioned or not. And if there is a movie in a theater that's captioned, then I can go. It's getting better and better. There is a state, there are two states, Hawaii and Maryland, that just passed laws recently that made it mandatory for all new movies to be open captioned. Not just captioned, but open captioned. And so therefore they wouldn't have to depend, deaf people who watch it wouldn't have to depend on any device to caption it for them. So it's pretty exciting. So that's one example of an improvement. So thank you for letting me add that in.
awesome. Thank you. All right. Now we're about to get serious, right? Now we're going to start touching on AI bias and misrepresentation. And before yes,
Go ahead.
And just before we get into that, I want to share some news that we may not be aware of because it just happened yesterday. And this is some breaking news from the U.S. Access Board. So just yesterday, which is May 15th, at their Washington, D.C. office, the U.S. Access Board signed a memorandum of understanding with the American Associations of People with Disabilities, AAPD, and their Centers for Democracy and Technology, CDT, Charlie Delta Tango, to ensure that the disability community is engaged and supported through education and resources related to AI. Right. And in that press release, the Access Board stated or, highlighted that artificial intelligence can increase accessibility, but it can also create barriers for people with disabilities. And to address inequity and to address equity and accessibility, the Access Board was tasked with several actions in the executive order on the safe, secure, and trustworthy, again, trustworthy development and use of artificial intelligence. And if you want to take a look at that executive order, pay attention to section 2, subsection D, which speaks about making sure that underserved groups are not misrepresented or affected by AI. And it's a pretty long executive order. So please take time to read through it and you'll find the pertinent sections. But that's just some breaking news out there coming down around artificial intelligence and making sure that the disability community is not left out. So on that same... Yep.
Before we go to the next quote, I wonder if we should show the demonstration on Be My AI.
Oh, yeah, sure. Yeah, we can definitely show that.
So we were speaking, some of us were speaking at a conference in Minneapolis, Minnesota, a couple of months ago. It was actually a conference on information architecture. And one of our advisory board members, Ken Rogers, did a really fun demonstration on Be My AI. And to introduce that, I was wondering if Maureen, you use Be My AI, if you could talk a little bit about that.
Yep. Be My AI. Be My AI is part of the Be My Eyes app for the phone. And Be My Eyes has been around for a while, and their idea was that blind people that needed sighted assistance could just get a volunteer and then use the camera from the phone to act like a sighted helper. And so blind people, use that, well, like I mentioned, to see if my office light was on. I use it to check the setting on the washer, to, little things like that. And it will call someone, and then you can use your camera on the phone, and it's really handy. But they have expanded now, and they have Be My AI, which uses artificial intelligence. And so as you'll see in this demonstration, it is pretty amazing where it describes things. And it depends on how you're holding your phone and the angle and stuff. I myself have not had real good luck with it because I have some difficulty holding my phone because of my physical disability. So when I've tried to use it to take a picture of a package, for example, and tell me what's in the package or the cooking directions, it often has said that it couldn't read it. But when Ken did this demo, it's really pretty neat, and he got lots of good information.
So this is Maureen and Ken and I. For non-visual users, I'll just set this up. Maureen and Ken and I are on a stage, and Ken is facing the audience with his phone. And it's pretty fun because the demonstration is Be My AI describing the audience to the audience. Ellen, do you want to roll that?
I'm going to take a picture of what is in front of me.
Take picture. Analyzing picture. Please wait. The picture shows an indoor auditorium with rows of seats descending towards the front of the room. The seats are mostly filled with people. The audience appears attentive and casually dressed. Lights hanging from the ceiling, which is also white. There are large concrete pillars and the walls are paneled with light wood. The flooring in the aisle is a light gray color. The picture shows an indoor audit. Ask more.
So then it gives me the opportunity to ask more questions. So I could type in or use my voice to ask a question. Tell me more about the people sitting in the rows. And it will further analyze and tell me more about people that are sitting in the rows. This is way more information than I had ever been able to ascertain from an app or from some tool since I lost my sight 30 years ago.
Now, I must say, I have also used this feature, and my mind was blown with it. And I now tend to use that app if I want to sort of get a sense of like the clothes that I'm wearing, and exactly, how I might look. I took a picture of my wife one time standing in the room, and it described her dress and the background that was around her and the room, and her reaction was, oh, I have a nice clean room. So she was more concerned on the ambiance and that the room was clean and not considered cluttered. Instead of very neatly organized room. So she was more fascinated with that, and I was more fascinated with the physical descriptions of the clothing and the correlation between the colors on her dress and the curtains that were in her background. So very artistic, descriptions of your surroundings. So if you have an iPhone, or I'm not sure if it's available on Android, I'm pretty sure it is by now, I would recommend downloading that app and playing around with it.
It was really fun to be there because the audience was so pleased that they were described as attentive. That's when everybody laughed. But it was really quite a group experience.
And that reaction, just remember that reaction or what that description gave. It's going to come back up in our third sort of panel, our third sort of section, when we talk about the innovations or how far AI has come and how it's catching up to us. So just a bit of a teaser. But now we're going to get into the subject of bias and misrepresentation. And I'm going to share a quote with you. And it's from a Forbes article by Lawrence Ruru. And Lawrence is quoted, "If we're creating tools that are fed with information that can bias against certain groups, and we're integrating those into very crucial aspects of our lives, what's going to be the impact of that?" So my first question, and I'm going to send it over to you, Chad. What concerns do you have about being misrepresented by AI as a person living with a disability? And as Chad answers that, I want the rest of the panel to think about that. And if you want to come in after Chad, feel free.
Yeah, I've been thinking about this question for the last few days, and I'm just I'm not quite coming up with the example or anything. I've really been concerned about misrepresentation by AI from my standpoint, I guess. Just that yeah, I think people might look at me and say, well, maybe that person can't use anything, because of my disability. That's one of the only things I can think of that worries me, that, AI will, like, when might take a picture of me and something will happen, with all these things coming out, like Google AI and all that will change my appearance. And I just want to make sure that, it's coming through the way I feel it should be coming through.
Right.
I think that's one of the biggest ones that I feel it's coming about. A lot of the most phones now, they take a picture and you can change everything, and it's like, what can you believe? So that's probably one of the things I be more concerned about.
Yeah, that's a good point. Exactly. If they're coding, something like seeing AI, like, what is it going to classify a person, let's say, in a wheelchair as? We've heard horror stories where it's classified them as like a mailbox or some inanimate object, and it's a person sitting in a wheelchair. So yeah, that's because the people programming it is not taking that community into account.
Right.
We can go over to Tyler. Do you have any concerns about being misrepresented by AI?
Oh my gosh, Paul, what concerns? Don't tell me. Thanks for laughing. That was a bad joke. I mean, so I have a kind of a two-pronged concern, and I want to start first with the conceptual aspect of this, and then transition to the practical implications. So, Paul, you mentioned earlier how you took a picture of a room and it described it a particular way, and that your wife perceived the room in a different way to how AI described it. And to kind of further that example in the Honda video, we heard a lot of very beautiful, quote unquote, flowery descriptions of the surroundings that the blind person was experiencing through the layer of interpretation the AI provided. And so my concern, one of my chief concerns as someone who is low vision and uses AI to interpret the world around me visually and describe it to me, I have a hesitation about allowing AI to be another layer that decides for me what I perceive. So when I take a picture and I want to know what's in the picture, I mentioned earlier that Seeing AI just added a feature where I can ask clarifying questions. That helps allay this a little bit, but we still have a machine recognizing the image and deciding for us what it looks like. Or even with a person, we could go, well, I want to know about this information, and this is what I think is important. And the AI, if it doesn't recognize something, just won't mention it a lot of the time. it doesn't have the ability yet to recognize what is valuable to humans, and it may never. And on top of that, it may never recognize what is important to me as an individual. So that's kind of the conceptual level. To move that forward a little bit into practical terms, we have a lot of overlays used right now, and it's ironic. This is great job security for me. Anyone who uses an overlay on their website falls prey to the idea that disability is a solvable problem, that you can pay a subscription fee and have accessibility fixed for you. And so when I go on the website, I have a large algorithm decide for me how I should interact with the website. So when I use a website with an overlay, the screen reader I use gets trapped a lot of the time, and the website breaks. The features are different because I'm being provided a different experience. And so again, I have AI going, oh, you don't want this, you want this. And so based on a subset of data, someone else decides for me what I should see. And I don't like that. And I think it's something we're going to have to face, that we're limiting people's experiences while trying to treat them like a problem with a solution.
That's a great point. That is a great point. And you made me think with your first part just about, a machine sort of determining what's sort of important or what I need to know. And I can relate to the person with the visual disability that that's where I usually get the most annoyed, is when, things try to tell me what it considers to be important versus what information I need to know. I can spend hours on that, so I won't take us down that rabbit hole. I'll let the panelists elaborate on that a bit more. Grant, do you have any concerns as a person living with a disability as being misrepresented by AI?
I do. I'm going to give you one example. Every time I use my favorite
transcribe app.
Transcribe app, thank you. There's no sign for that, so I had to finger spell it, sorry. But when I'm reading people communicate, and it could be going on for quite some time, I could use it in the workplace, for example, and we're talking, and then perhaps a person gets upset because they think that I'm trying to record their conversation.
Mm-hmm.
And they time me out because they're like, hey, this is a privacy issue. And I'm letting them know this is not recording you. It's just a temporary download so the algorithm can actually interpret and caption and transcribe it. And there won't be a copy available of the conversation. But for folks that are not in tune to this technology, they believe that I'm invading their privacy. And they'll stop me because they want to make sure that anything that we're talking about that's privileged is not out there, right? So I need to do more educating on my end so that they have a full understanding of how these apps benefit us without breaching privacy.
A follow-up question to that. Do you find it hard to get to use those apps during work or get approval for those apps through security because of the misunderstanding of privacy and cloud-based applications?
I do.
As a service?
Yes, I do. Sometimes, I mean, it really depends on the individual. Another example is that there's someone I work very close to. We are housed very close to each other, and there's a lot of noise. And it doesn't bother me, of course, because I can't hear what's happening. But the app will pick up any sound recognition and things that are happening environmentally in the background. So that's another challenge that I'm faced with. If I'm talking outside, for example, or on the machine floor or the tech floor or whatnot, sometimes I'm going to have to ask for a repeat to make sure that I've got the accurate information. And then they'll ask me if things are licensed, and I'll say, no, I don't have the license. It's free. But if I need captioning while I'm working on my PC, I don't have that. I don't have the ability to just transcribe, so I have to augment it with my telephone so that I can get access to that communication. So I do use Chrome, and Chrome has it, but Microsoft, the products we're using doesn't have this transcribing ability. So there's going to have to be some software added that may be of added benefit to me, and that's another layer.
Right. Awesome. Taylor, how are you doing?
All right. So I have a lot to say, so I'll try to keep it brief because, yeah, you guys don't want to hear me all the time because it's boring. So, there's a whole lot to say about this, but I'll just kind of boil it down to three things. One, AI can be a problem for people in a couple different areas. One, hiring, because if AI is hiring people, right, it could disadvantage people with disabilities based on what the training data is. The solution is we need to make sure that people with disabilities are influencing AI development. That's very important. Point two, I was talking earlier when I was doing my little live stream on YouTube about the whole overlays thing. I'm glad you brought that up, Tyler. The overlays are definitely a problem. And it's kind of like, overlays are trying to use more AI than what we have right now, and they're actually making it worse. Because I lived in an apartment, they added an overlay. I couldn't pay my rent that month until they removed it because it made it worse. About the algorithms that you guys keep talking about trying to show what you want to see, that's actually been happening for a while, especially dealing with like Facebook and other things. It actually uses the algorithm and it kind of filters, hey, you want to see posts from this person, but not that person, right? It's like you want to hear from WeCo or you don't want to hear from WeCo. So it's kind of annoying in that regard. So we've already had a lot of algorithm stuff, but yeah, hopefully that clarifies things up. So I'm kind of concerned, but I also feel like with every problem, there must be a solution.
Awesome. I like that point of view, right? You have some of the concerns, but also a way out of it, right? Giving people some of those steps to avoid, and a little bit on how to avoid them. Marine.
As an employer, we hear a lot of concerns all the time about, how privacy is being protected and things like that. And I think if there's anything that I hear coming up over and over and over again is the frustration that our employees who are blind and low vision have with these overlays. I know Maureen has shared with me that just the fact that she enters a website and that there is a mechanism, this overlay detects that she's a screen reader user,
Very
she feels
terrible.
is a violation of her privacy. That why should the owner of a website be privy to what kind of assistive technology she's using? And I think that's a pretty valid concern. And I think that it speaks to the separate but equal treatment that society by large still insists upon for people with disabilities. And that I think that it begs a larger question is why? Why is it okay for us to still treat people with disabilities differently? Or what you alluded to, I think it was Tyler who talked about it. Why is my disability a problem that needs to be solved? In a company like WeCo, we see disability as a skill set. It's a different perspective. It's a perspective our clients need and want at their table. Why is this something that needs to be treated as different? And why does privacy have to be violated in order for that to happen? But I'll get off my soapbox on that, but I think that's, and then when you just look at everything you're seeing about, how people with disabilities, we move different, we sound different, we're shaped different if we're seated in a wheelchair or using a walker. And if that we are not the norm, if we are deemed as not the norm, just what Taylor was saying, if we're not involved in AI development, then that means that we are going to be ruled out of a whole lot of things. You know, whether we'll be deemed not a good risk for healthcare, will be deemed not suitable for a job. So
Yeah, I have actually been turned down for jobs before because they ask me to do the AI assesses you on a little video and you answer questions to an AI instead of a person, and then it decides based on if you make eye contact, if you shift too much, whether you're a respectable person. So that's been a problem I've consistently had in the past.
Me too, even at an accessibility company.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Not ours though, right, Taylor?
Heck no. Oh, you would have heard about it, Lynn. You would have heard about it. You would have heard about it. Yeah, trust me, I'm pretty vocal. You know, I'm all over the place. You would have heard me probably tweeting it to over my 1,000 followers.
My door is always
This
open.
means war.
No, not you, Lynn. Your WeCo is amazing.
And that's a great
The
valid.
check is in the mail, Taylor. Thank you.
Send it to the right address. I'm kidding.
And that's a great valid point again about misrepresentation, and thinking on sort of a level of employment and hiring as we try to get more and more people with disabilities into the work world and in different roles, and a lot of accessibility roles are opening up in large companies and then some, you know, Fortune 500 companies. And if they don't have the right human resource mechanisms there, they're relying on AI, and AI is then, you know, discriminating or misrepresenting people with disabilities and keeping them out of those jobs. You know, it can be a slippery slope there. This brings you to the next question. Lines it up perfectly how Lynn just ended the last one. And I'm going to start with you, Lynn. What do people who want to develop with AI for people with disabilities need most to understand? As they're developing AI for us, what do they need to understand?
I think that the first thing that AI developers need to understand is that the natural inclination and the traditional practice is to exclude people with disability even when you are dealing with how to meet their needs. We are not consulted. It's something that I think you have to come to terms with to understand that is an inclination you're going to encounter with yourself and others, because that is people with disabilities. I actually presented a presentation on this at Open Source North in Minneapolis last year about how people with disabilities are still systematically excluded from the digital experience because there is a mindset that dates way, centuries back on how people with disabilities were treated, how we were set apart in institutions, how we were not consulted because we were considered first, basically at fault for our own disabilities, and in some countries still are, or taboo. And then next, we were considered ill, that it was a medical, they call it a medical model. And I think that many of us, even if we don't realize it, especially if we don't have people with disabilities in our life and we don't have one ourselves, is that we're fixed on this medical model. And that medical model means that person is in bed and sick, and we do not bother them. We fix this without them. And I think that everybody working on AI has to embrace the fact that first, I am going to want to exclude people. And I've been in this industry for 13 years. I was raised in a family where I and my 4 sisters all had disabilities, generations of disabilities. That was back in the 60s and 70s. We were treated very, very differently. And I'm telling you it's not your fault. It's what you learned. And you're going to have to embrace that first, because only then can you make a real strides in realizing that you need to include people. And you may not know people with disabilities. You need to make the effort to find people who can contribute to that research.
That's a great point, and a great valid point, which I think is sometimes overlooked sometimes, or organizations are thinking of how can I do this quickly and cheaply sometimes.
And people
sometimes
honestly,
people just don't know.
They don't mean to exclude.
Right.
They really don't, but they don't understand that mindset has been part of our society across the world for so long that they don't know that it's their natural inclination.
Yeah, and I see it still in some places. When my previous job lives, when I used to go into schools, I still would see kids with disabilities that were perfectly capable of sitting out of gym, and
right.
I'm like, why are they not participating? Oh, they can't see. So like
it's debatable. The guy who just missed the ball can't see either, right?
Exactly. Exactly.
Only difference is how many concussions you have in the bank.
That's
exactly.
Right.
I'm glad you just spoke up, Mr. Tyler, because I know you do some coding.
I'm regretting it. Yeah.
I know you do some coding.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think people that develop or that are going to develop AI for people with disabilities need most to understand doing this development for us?
Oh, well, I think Lynn really did get at it nicely just now. I have actually had the great fortune of speaking with a few people who've reached out over LinkedIn in the past and asked me. They'll see that I work in accessibility and go, hey, what do you think? I'm developing this. How do you think what should I be aware of? And the biggest thing I try to push in these conversations I've had is AI needs to be a tool. You're not fixing disability. You can't fix a disability with an AI. But what you can do is you can provide accessible tools the same way we provide accessible experiences on websites that ensure that a disabled person can access AI the same way a person without a disability can access it. And I think that's something a lot of people miss. They come up with these ideas and they think, I'm going to solve a problem. And like I said earlier, disability is not a problem to be solved. Disability is something that we, learn to live with and manage. And it shouldn't be treated like a problem. It should be treated like a different lifestyle almost. We have different needs, but we still have needs, and you can easily meet those needs, but you need to develop to them. And a big part of that is including us in your data set. Disability is just one of many minorities that is overlooked by AI right now, and it needs to be included in order to make sure we're building for that minority.
Well said. Open up to the other panelists that might want to weigh in on this topic before we move on. Does anybody else want to sort of weigh in on this
I
question?
have something to say.
Okay.
So
Taylor, sorry.
Awesome.
I know it's going to happen once today.
I know, right? At least once, hopefully, I don't know.
Once.
It's kind of funny. Okay, so I do agree with what Lynn and Tyler are both saying. I think if I expand on the recruitment of people with disabilities, look, there are so many places you can get people with disabilities for your testing. There's so many companies trying to get AI developed, and there's so many places to get people with disabilities. So if I was a company, what would I be doing? Well, you see, there's this thing called LinkedIn or, other social media, YouTube or other things. And you want to look for creators who have disabilities, right? Because, for example, let's say you want to browse YouTube. And let's say, for example, I don't know, the company is GitHub, right? Because I use GitHub Copilot. And let's say that, GitHub reached out to me, be like, hey, how can we make this more inclusive for people with disabilities? The reason that they actually reached out to me was because I have a disability and I made it prominently clear, like in my YouTube video, when I actually reviewed GitHub Copilot. Right, that's just one example. So if I was a company, what I'd be doing is, one, I would be wanting to include people with disabilities. That's the first step. You got to want to do it before you actually try to do it. And two, try to find creators who are influencers in this space who can provide you constructive feedback to help make your product better.
Paul, I think that Grant had something to offer as well.
Okay. Grant, you have the floor.
Hi there. Yeah, I just wanted to put some emphasis on the fact that smartphones like this, we all have them. But mostly what I'm concerned about with that is that what I don't like is sharing the phone with other people to communicate, passing it back and forth. So like if I write a text message, then I have to turn it around to show the other person. They then will have to take my phone and hold on to it in order to read the message. And that bothers me because they could just walk off with it. What if they decide to steal it, or they walk off and they drop it and it breaks, and then everything gets all screwed up. So we do need to be thinking also about our security concerns in the process of talking about this. And I wish there was some sort of a way that somebody could have their own app, a hearing person could have their own app to communicate with me or with other deaf individuals, because I don't really want to really trust anybody to interact with my phone physically, to touch it or hold on to it.
Understandable.
Yeah, that's a great point. And I'm just thinking, this popped in my head, maybe technology where we can have two phones that would link through, NFC, near field communication, or short range Bluetooth that will link our phones if we're close to each other, and we can then communicate back and forth. But then again, would the security say, well, what about the person's phone privacy? Not knowing that with that, you already releasing your privacy when you hand over your phone to someone else to sort of, communicate with you. So again, it's that cross-sectionality.
Yeah, right, Paul. So for example, I went to the mechanic yesterday. Everybody had filthy hands, and I really did not want to hand my phone over to somebody that had grease and whatnot on their hands. So I brought a notepad and a pen, and I went old school and wrote back and forth on paper. And I didn't care if the paper got dirty, obviously, but there are obviously still some limitations, and that added feature, unfortunately, of security concerns.
And I think that that's a really good point, Grant, that, this expectation that because you live with a disability, that you're going to compromise your privacy and your safety in a way that someone who is not deaf would never think of handing their phone over to a stranger. But yet there is this expectation that because you are deaf that you will. Right. And that's separate but equal kind of thinking,
Well, and I think we're kind of on this whole topic of what do AI developers need, is to also recognize that we're talking about like, we'll do this for disabled, but also recognizing that disabled is a huge group, and because something works well for one person with a disability doesn't mean that that same technology is going to help every person, because it depends. There's some things, like I mentioned, that I've run into, like using Be My AI, that haven't worked as well for me because I have dual disabilities. So it's you have to take the individual person into mind too.
Right. Great point.
Probably should wrap up with our last one, Paul.
Yeah, I'm about to get to that one right now. It's a perfect segue into it. Where would digital accessibility lead us? All right, I'm going to end with our last quote here by Megan McCarthy. All right, and this is a quote from the Forbes report. Yep. All right. So, no, sorry, I'm crediting the wrong place. It's the Stanford report. So the quote goes, the Stanford Institute for Human-Centered AI, or HAI, and its latest AI index report finds that tech is quickly gaining on humans. I'll say it again. AI is quickly gaining on humans. According to the report, AI now exceeds human capabilities, not only in areas like simple reading comprehension and image classification, but also in domains that start to approach human logic, like natural language inference. So that means the ability to draw inferences from text, or visual reasoning, the ability to deduce physical relationships between visual objects. All right. So according to that report, it's catching up and surpassing us in certain areas. Now, Lynn, I'm going to pick on you again. I'm sorry.
No, no, that's why I'm
do
here.
Do you think AI is going to be better than our input? And when I mean our input, I mean the disability community.
Well, I think that I can speak to in regards to where AI is going to be leading digital accessibility. We all understand that anything that we can automate and speed up can be extremely helpful. And even in a team of manual accessibility auditors like our company, where that's what we specialize in, we use automation to a certain extent. We use tools that can detect color contrast better than the human eye. We can use our clients' software checker suites to make sure that, that checks the things in code that are not working for accessibility. And I think that AI being a part of digital accessibility is a great thing. The cautionary tale that I have of that harkens back to the last statement that I made about the inclination that we have as a society to prescribe accessibility fixes. I mean, we even in our industry of manual audits, we refer to making something accessible as remediation. And I have often thought that that was kind of interesting because I think that has a human or physical component to it as well. But I think that where we're going with all of these overlays that are now being given away free to nonprofits, and despite the fact that they are driving up inaccessibility lawsuits, they clearly don't work for people who are blind, that these are being pushed upon our society and those of us with disabilities, is that there is this desire to continue to exclude people with disabilities from being communicating, being consulted about their own digital accessibility preferences and needs. And I think AI is only going to make that easier for people who live with disabilities to be discarded, tossed aside. Oh, we don't have to ask anymore. We've got an algorithm. I think that's the biggest fear. Now, what we're seeing in our clients, and we're seeing this a lot in our large corporate clients in particular, is that they understand that. And they are working harder to integrate us and to think of more ways they can bring in our testers and our accessibility specialists, because they understand that as AI becomes more complex, more sophisticated, that having that human input piece is so important. But I don't think everybody's going to get that. So that's my biggest concern, is that it'll be yet another way to to exclude us rather than include us.
Yeah, that is definitely food for thought, especially as people are trying to sort of develop in a way of trying to use AI to sort of solve that problem and sort of integrate it into their codes and coming up with sort of means to make it easier for dev, to sort of solve for accessibility, and leaving the human out of it is a dangerous thing.
It's a balance, and we're always telling people that it's a balance. But I think human beings have this impulse to swing one way or the other. It's either all automation or no automation.
Right.
But really, where it's at, I think, as somebody who's been in this industry for 13 years, that's seen it at a point in its infancy, that there is a happy spot where humans and machines can work together.
All right. So as we quickly draw to an end, and I wish we had more time, because we could talk about this, forever. There's a few more, topics and questions that we could possibly expand. Maybe the next one needs to be maybe 2 hours, but in closing, I will open it up and say, could this AI, that can be used for good, do we think it could also, and I think just from what we've heard so far, I think we all believe that it could also end up, excluding us if our input is not given. So I would send it out to the panel for a short, brief wrap up before we end our time. And if there's any questions, I'm sure Ellen's been monitoring. So I'll start with Grant. Start first with a quick wrap up. Give everybody like 30 seconds wrap up to close the panel out.
Maybe.
Certainly. This is Grant. If you believe in time travel, it will happen. So AI will happen, right? But it is going to take time. We are going to see some delays, but I certainly believe the day of AI is going to come.
Awesome. Taylor, you want to?
I agree. I think AI is going to keep getting better and better. And I think that what we need to do as an industry is we need to embrace it, but we don't want to let it take over.
Awesome. Couldn't have said it better myself. Maureen?
No, I agree with Taylor. I just thought that is a great way to do it. And like I said, I'm looking for the day when I can just turn my wheelchair on and say, go to the pharmacy or whatever, and it'll know how to just drive there. And so there's some, dreams that we can have that are going to come true with AI, but we don't want it to be taken over our minds and making it so it's in control of us.
I say we pitch to Elon that he creates a Tesla chair, right? He's got the car, you put that technology into a chair.
I like that. Yeah, I agree. I like that idea. Being a wheelchair user, it's like, let's make it a smart wheelchair. So yeah. And I agree. I think AI is going to get better and stronger, and so yeah, agree with everybody.
Awesome. Taylor, when you run off to the salon tomorrow,
or Tyler.
Tyler, damn it, twice.
Your bill is in the mail, Paul.
I'm actually looking at your name, dude, and I still said Taylor.
That's okay. Well, I have room in my heart to forgive you.
Thank you.
What I don't have room in my heart for is forgiving AI. I do think, like everyone else, AI is coming, and it is a wonderful opportunity for advancement. and to support disability. I think a problem we're going to see is that, like a lot of emerging technologies, AI is being hyped as a solution to every problem. It's being hyped as an automation that will replace people and replace the needs of people with solutions that are ever-growingly customized. But what we need to keep in mind is that it needs to be a people-first approach, because the solutions we're producing are for people, not for machines.
Awesome. I'm gonna put that on a shirt. Like, honestly, couldn't have said better. Couldn't have said it better. All right, Lynn, you want to close this out with the final statement on this?
Well, I'll just say that this is probably going to age me, but if you haven't seen Space Odyssey, remember Hal. It's a computer that takes over a space station it's filmed in the late 60s. It's a classic. But no, honestly, I mean, I think that we're on the edge of a wonderful set of discoveries. I mean, the last 20 to 60, 80 years, we have seen advances in human rights like we have never had before. And in the last 10, 20 years, advances in technology, and they're leveling the playing field for everyone. Everyone is going to be at some point in their lives disabled through age or injury. It just is going to happen. The World Health Organization estimates that you will spend on average at least 11 years of your life disabled if you go through most of your life without a disability. So it's wonderful to think that we can all continue to contribute and that we can all be useful and joyful beings, regardless of if our bodies decide to cooperate with our minds or not. And I look forward to watching AI be able to help in that respect. So
awesome. Well said. I would just like to end by saying thank you to everyone that has joined us today, and especially thank you to all the panelists coming and sharing your personal and professional views and experiences. I think these type of sessions are very valuable. It teaches, it makes people aware, and again, it's whenever we can get people with multiple disabilities together and sharing our combined and different experiences, I think it only makes the world around us better. So I greatly appreciate you coming and having this conversation with me.
And thank you, Paul, for doing such a great job moderating. We really appreciate it.
Thank you. I guess we would, if we have time or any questions, I guess this is the point in time. Ellen, I guess you can take it away from here.
The panel can hang out for a few minutes in case there are any questions from the audience. Well, thanks for being a great audience too. This was a long event.
Yeah.
So a lot to discuss.